Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on when you're listening to this and where you're listening to it from. This evening, we're going to be going through the Nick Reiner updates. I know I did a live the other day going through some updates, but just after I wrapped up that live, TMZ did a video going through even more updates, and then the on the two angry or old man show, the one that Harvey Levin does with Mark Garagos, the attorney. They were talking about the new updates and new bits of information to do with Nick Reiner and more context about his mental state and some clarification on diagnosis and meds as well. So I hope you'll be happy to join us for this evening's live. And after I'm done here, you can find me on ATS News, where I'll be putting my acting skills to the test and playing the part of the FBI agent who was, quote unquote, questioning Nicole Kessinger. So after that, after I finish up here, make sure you catch me over there. So you'll have me for 2 hours rather than just the usual one, or ever forever as long as ATS's live goes on. But yeah, let's get right into it. So yeah, we have it. It's been confirmed that the meds were changed by doctors, and it's unclear whether they were doctors in the rehab or Nick's regular doctors. But meds were changed by doctors. Again, we don't know rehab doctors or his regular doctor. We don't know. I'm leaning towards rehab doctor because I don't think his regular doctor would make such a silly mistake. Get this, the reason for Nick's medication change after being stable on that cocktail of meds for years. Hi, Amy. Glad you could join us. I'm going to put the link in chat for you or anyone who would like to join us. Here we go. Hopefully that works. And there we are. Yeah. But yeah, what the update is that Nick's medication was changed by doctors. Glad you could join us. Glad you could join us. Amy's great. She's a free Karen reader and she does true crime lives. And she's been recently going into the whole Lauren Matthias hidden true crimes debacle. And she's a big supporter of Amber's and mine. And Amber and I always go into her chat. And she has a very relaxed and very like open kind of chat where you can have a joke, but obviously serious topics, but like balance it out type of thing. That's the thing. That's what we do here. Obviously we're never mocking any of the victims like hidden true crime Lauren Matthias does. We're trying to find balance in situations that are so horrific and difficult to deal with, because if we didn't, we'd just be depressed and we'd lose our minds and we would have no joy in doing any of this. You know what I mean? You've got to have joy in everything that you do in life. So I think Amy's a good example of a channel that allows for that balance. Amber's the same. I'm the same. Alex Erickson's the same. So yeah, we all kind of fit into that boat. But yeah, Nick's medications were changed because, get this, he was gaining weight. That is not a valid reason to change somebody's it's schizoaffective disorder. His schizoaffective disorder, different than schizophrenia. We thought it was schizophrenia, but it's schizoaffective disorder. We'll get into that though. That's not a valid reason to change someone's medication. That's like a common complaint in these medications: the weight gain or the loss of sexual appetite, shall we say. But those alone aren't valid reasons to change somebody's medication. Valid reasons are severe negative side effects, such as them not working in the way that they should, like having mania, depression, or the symptoms are becoming more severe and coming on. That's when you change. Like when he had his new cocktail of drugs. That was clearly a time to change because they were doing way worse. What that new medic cocktail of medication did for him was way worse. Hi, Melly. Glad you could join us. The link's there if you want to hop up. But yeah, Melly's another great channel that I watch, and she's like Amber and Amy and Ali and all the others that I've mentioned. She allows for some fun and some lightheartedness in and amongst the serious true crime stuff. So that's important to have the balance. So I'm glad you're here, Melly. We're talking about Nick Reiner updates. So yeah, gaining weight is not a valid reason to change someone's cocktail of medication. His cocktail of meds before he committed the murder, allegedly, was doing him great. He was manageable. He wasn't violent. He wasn't antisocial to a great degree. He was manageable. He wasn't perfect. He was manageable. But because of the weight gain, apparently that was valid reason enough. It's not to mess around with the cocktail. And let's just think about this, guys. What would you rather have? A guy killing his parents in like a cold-blooded, ruthless, horrific way, or a guy gaining weight? Like, what would you rather have as a medical professional? Like, surely they should have known any kind of messing around with that cocktail of meds could be potentially life-changing for Nick and for those around him. And still they did it anyway, based off the flimsy reason of, oh, he was gaining weight. That's absolutely ridiculous. And whichever doctor decided to do that, whether it was his regular general practitioner or it was a doctor affiliated with one of the 18 rehabs that he stayed in, I'm pretty sure that they're going to be held liable some way in some suit if there is one further along the line. Yeah, absolutely, Amy. It's completely outrageous. It's wild. It's unthinkable, the level of naivety from a medical professional to make such a call. And as I mentioned earlier, we did think it was schizophrenia. I thought it was schizophrenia, but it's close to schizophrenia, what Nick was diagnosed with back in 2020. It's called schizoaffective disorder. Very similar to schizophrenia. People who suffer from it are prone to delusions, prone to manic states, and crippling depression, like the worst kind of depression. So like voices in your head telling you you're no good. And just poking at every little insecurity that you might have, you know what I mean? And just making your life hell and unlivable. And I don't want to imagine what kind of existence that's like. I really don't. And apparently, and this goes into the delusions. It's so sad. This goes into the delusion part. Apparently, Nick Reiner does not remember killing his parents, as I thought he probably wouldn't have. Along with the fact that he believes he's in Twin Towers, the facility where he's locked up, because of a conspiracy, that he's being framed, that he didn't do this, and this is a setup, and that he's the victim of a frame job. And that's fairly typical of someone with that condition to think like that. And it's very typical of him not to remember any of this. Because, I've been reading, like, when they have these episodes, obviously they're not in control of their own functions, their own mind, their own actions. I think I've read that a lot of the times psychiatrists have theorized that the mind blocks out that kind of stuff to protect itself. That's one thing that the brain can still do functionally, is to block out traumatic things. It can still do that despite suffering from schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. It can still do that. So that is why Nick does not remember. It could also be possible that he was completely high off his mind and relapsed as well, but we've heard nothing about that. We've heard actually reports of the contrary, that he didn't have anything in his system other than his medication, and all. He did have Ritalin in his system, because that was, if you listen to the Dopey podcast, his kind of drug of choice. So even Ritalin can throw a spanner in the mix and can really affect things. Anything that affects brain chemistry with someone with schizoaffective or schizophrenic disorders, it's like I said, it's a ticking time bomb. It's playing Russian roulette with your brain, with somebody's brain. You really can't predict or know what can happen. So like what I was saying earlier, the doctor that decided to change his meds after them working and him being stable for years was playing Russian roulette with Nick's brain and with Nick's safety and with the safety of everybody around him. And that doctor, I think, is negligible, definitely. Hi, Neat Noodle. Hi, Diva Girl, and everyone. Yeah, it's actually the same thing. New name for schizophrenia as well. Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think. Yeah, because I think that's probably true because I think that they don't like using schizophrenia anymore because I think that it's gotten such a bad rap because yeah, like I said in my other live, the only time you ever hear of it mentioned is when someone goes on a killing spree and has schizophrenia. You know what I mean? You don't hear of someone who, like what I was saying, Sid Barrett from Pink Floyd. You don't really hear of him being a schizophrenic and like never hurting anybody, or the guy from not Blues Brothers. No, not the Blues Brothers. From that band from the 60s, the Beach Boys. Yeah, that guy from the Beach Boys. You never hear of those guys who had schizophrenia and who never harmed a fly and who lived very peaceful life. Although it suffered a lot, never harmed another person. So like that's the issue there. So I think that that's probably why they're going with schizoaffective disorder as a new term. But hi, Amber. I'm glad you could join us. And I was just saying earlier that I'll be on Amber's panel after this, and I'll be putting my acting skills to the test, playing the role of a FBI agent who was quote unquote questioning Nicole Kessinger. So yeah, after I'm done here, make sure to catch me over there with Amber, and you can listen to me pretend to be an FBI agent. So yeah, that should be fun. Glad you could join us, Amber. But yeah, it's crazy, and apparently, from word is ever since his meds were changed a month prior to the murder, the Reiners, Rob and Michelle were saying to friends like they're really worried about Nick and that he was getting dangerous. And it seems like it's unclear as if they said that he was being violent or not. But I think that that's the implication. I think that because of how he'd been before, like it seems like everything that he was doing was he was getting mad, he was getting manic, he was breaking stuff, but he wasn't actually hurting anybody. And I think that the turn of them saying that he was starting to get dangerous was that he was being violent or threatening violence. You know what I mean? Like that's what I think. And it's interesting because if you look at him in the thumbnail of this live stream, the drawing that the court reporter did of him. I'm just pouring myself a Pepsi because I'm still in the UK, related to the funeral of my grandmother because I came back home, so to speak, to attend her funeral. So for me, it's later on. So forgive me. I've got to have some Pepsi to keep me awake and alert because it's for my time. It's midnight. It's 15 minutes past midnight my time. So I went on later because I know the majority of my viewership are North Americans. So that's why. But yeah, forgive me. But yeah, I'm glad you could all make it. And yeah, it's interesting what I was saying. The drawing of him from the court reporter, Nick looks a lot skinnier. So it's possible that whilst he's been in Twin Towers, that they've given him a new cocktail of meds. Because I would assume that the fact that he killed his mother and father on the last cocktail, that they wouldn't keep giving him that. So I think that he's on a new cocktail of meds. This hasn't been stated anywhere. I've just deduced this myself. So this is pure speculation on my part. So take this with a grain of salt. But in that picture, that drawing, he does look a lot skinnier than he does in the thumbnails of the last streams I've done of him. Recent photos of him where his appearance completely changed from how he looked 10 years ago. So I'm thinking that the last round of meds that he was on that was keeping him stable is what caused that change of appearance. But now it seems on this new cocktail of meds, he's reverted back to how he looked prior to that, how he looked when he was promoting Being Charlie with his father, Rob. So it's interesting how a medication affecting the brain can completely affect other parts of the body, and you can see the physical change, but it's impossible to see the mental one, and that's why it's interesting. I'm certain they changed his meds since he's gone. And I agree. I think I know that in UK prisons they used to give potentially unruly or difficult prisoners what was called the liquid kosh, which is like a concoction of like sleepers and diazepam and things like that, just to basically tranquilize people who could be an issue to make the duty of the guards easier. I'm sure in these days that there's more professionalism about that. So I'm assuming that they're trying their best, but still, they probably don't have enough time. They probably haven't had enough time to fully assess him yet and understand the potential, what meds he could. Honestly, though, it wouldn't surprise me if they just gave him what he was on prior to the change that caused him to, kill his parents, But then, if that was the case, surely he would have gained weight. But it's again, this is pure speculation. We have more to go off, but still a lot of unanswered questions. But yeah, I'll put the link in the chat again, Amber, if you'd like to come up, or anyone else. I'd love to hear anyone else's thoughts or opinions on this. So yeah, links there if anyone wants it. But no pressure if not. That's completely fine. But yeah, it's really interesting. I wonder if he will ever remember what happened, or if his brain has just completely blocked it out to protect himself. And if he does remember, like, what will that moment be like? What will that moment be like when he finally stabilizes and accepts what happened and the situation he's got himself into? How is he going to be able to deal with that? Is he going to be able to deal with that? It's such a complex situation because of mental health and illness. And is he ever going to get any visitors from his family, from Romy and Jake and Tracy? Or is any of his aunts, any of his uncles, any of his family friends, or is he going to be just stuck in a mental institution forever and never face up to what he did, or start to process it, or come to terms with it? Because if I don't think he should ever be out. I really don't. I think even if he is in a state where he's manageable, it's clear that one false move, one moment lapse of judgment where he either takes the wrong medication, gets the wrong medication, or relapses, and it could spiral this, because now we already know that's in there somewhere, that potential of him to be this violent. And he was violent not to some stranger, not to himself, but to the people who loved him the most. I don't think he can ever be let out, but I think safest place for him is inside a mental institution for the rest of his life, because at least there he's not going to relapse. They're going to have a lot better control over his medication, and he'll be in a place where they will absolutely take him seriously because of what he's done. And it's a sad thing when it comes to mental health, where it seems like people only really get decent treatment. This isn't just in America, this is all over the world. People only seem to get decent mental health treatment when they either threaten self-harm, harm themselves, or harm other people. You know what I mean? And it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't take a tragedy for someone to actually be able to get decent help. Because if people got decent help from the get-go, there'd be a lot less tragedies. I'm not saying there wouldn't be tragedies, but there'd be a lot less tragedies. And surely that's what we should aim for: less tragedies, less heartbreak, less trauma in society. And I think that it's all rooted in people getting the right kind of attention and care early on when these symptoms first become noticeable. And for doctors and for medical professionals to take it as seriously as any other conditions. I think that they wouldn't give someone with cancer medication for like a faulty heart. You know what I mean? For a heart attack medication, heart pain medication, or something like that. So why would they give a schizoaffective the wrong medication for his mental disorder? You know what I mean? Like the same logic has to apply. And as I've already stated in my previous lives, I will say this again: the fact that Nick was in rehab 18 times. I'm inclined to believe that these high-paying rehabs certainly took advantage of him and allowed him to set the false parameters and the wrong type of parameters that would not be conducive to him recovering from his substance abuse or getting some kind of mental health help, because these two go hand in hand. And I'm skeptical of someone being able to get the right type of help that they need when so much money is involved, when there's so much money involved. Like I was saying, 30 grand sometimes a week for these 30-day stays in rehab. I'm quite skeptical as to whether it was ever on the terms of the rehab or if it was on Nick's terms, because you've got to ask the question 18 times. Something's going on. You know what I mean? I think if he'd have gone to a place that was a lot less, tailoring to his whims, or a place that see, that's the issue though. It's a double-edged sword. You've got places that cater to these people's whims and don't give them the treatment that they need for their disorder, and essentially allow them to set their own parameters, and then they're never going to get better. But then on the other end, you have the rehab that Nick first went to, which was a pretty hard place. But the problem is with that is he wasn't an addict at that point. He was just dabbling in it when he was 15, and they put him in a room with a full-blown heroin addict who, convinced him that heroin was like the greatest drug ever, and it just blocks out all the negative stuff in your head. So for a guy who is probably already dealing with the early onset symptoms of schizoaffective disorder, the idea that you can take something and it just blocks out all the voices in your head seems like a miracle. You know what I mean? So I think if there was more understanding of mental illness early on, and mental illness in childhood, because I think that there's so much stigma around it that people don't want to see my kid's got mental health problems. People may just dismiss it as behavioral issues. Oh, they're only a kid, that they'll grow out of it. It's just a phase. No, if you see symptoms of mental illness in your kid and you don't do something about it, that's called being an abusive parent. That's called negligence. And that's the thing. I think that his parents initially, Nick and Michelle, and I'm not faulting Rob and Michelle, not Nick and Michelle, Rob and Michelle. I'm not faulting Rob and Michelle because, awareness of mental illness has only really developed in the last couple of years. Back when Nick was growing up in the 90s, I know that far less people went to therapists and to psychiatrists, and that saying you went to a shrink in the 90s still had stigma attached to it. And then eventually by the 2000s, that became more normal. But even like you watch a show like The Sopranos, Tony Soprano faces, discredit and not really ridicule, but suspicion from his men and through other people, his family, about why he's seeing a shrink, usually from his mother and from his uncle. They're like, why are you going to a shrink, Tony? And it's stigmatized. But like you say, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking in Nick's early childhood, Rob and Michelle were kind of oblivious to symptoms or signs in Nick's behavior that could have poked to early onset schizoaffective disorder, and that really his issue, of course, substance abuse was an issue for Nick. But my theory is that, and I've heard this from listening to interviews with people with schizophrenia and schizoaffective and other mental health disorders, that the substance abuse, if there is any, is to block out those symptoms, that disease, and to just obliterate it so that they can have some kind of peace. And I think that that's the root cause of Nick's issues, was that he has schizoaffective disorder, and that if Rob and Michelle had have identified that, or a professional had have identified, maybe in his rehab, maybe when they sent him to, maybe when he went to a doctor and said, you know, we think you've got mental health issues, let's get you assessed. But the issue with that is they're really hesitant to diagnose psychosis or schizoaffective disorder in young people because of the brain developing. They don't want to make a diagnosis as the brain's still developing. And I think that maybe needs to be reassessed. I think, you know, maybe you don't have to declare someone as schizophrenic or schizoaffectic or psychotic or whatever. Maybe you just say, this is a child and they're exhibiting traits of this. We're going to give them therapy and perhaps medication if needed. Okay. And I think if that was done, that approach, as opposed to throwing him into a rehab, I think maybe his life would have been less chaotic. The substance abuse issues would have been less. There would have been less resentment. Because I know he says on the Dopey podcast, I don't blame my parents. I made my own choices. I think he was just saying that. I do think that, you know, to not sound like a spoiled brat, so to speak, because he speaks about that in that interview and that podcast, because it is so telling. And if anyone hasn't, I will link it in my community post after I'm done on Amber's stream, when I've got a minute, and linking the Dopey podcast compilation of all of Nick's appearances, because he talks on that about the fact that he doesn't blame his parents, but he talks about how being sent to rehab the first time when he doesn't think he needed to have gone, when he wasn't doing drugs every day, he was just dabbling at a party, and his friends were the ones who were really into it, who probably needed that kind of help. But his mother freaked out, and he said she freaked out like mothers do. You know what I mean? Like any mother would. You know what I mean? And his parents didn't have a background in that kind of thing. Obviously, Rob Reiner talks about Rob Reiner did LSD in the 60s, but like left it there. He hadn't done drugs in years by that point, 30 plus years. So he didn't really know that world anymore. And Michelle never knew it. You know what I mean? So I think that I'm not faulting Rob and Michelle at all. But what I'm saying is, from this, I hope, and they would want this, I think, lessons to be learned about identifying mental illness at an early age and understanding the link between substance abuse and mental illness, and why people, you know, run to substances. And if someone who is a younger person, a child of yours, a younger family member, is having trouble with substance abuse or is dabbling, maybe ask them the question, are you having trouble in your head? Is there anything going on up there that you're trying to block out? Or is there anything going on in your life that you're trying to block out? You know what I mean? Or are you just like most people, just like a kid experimenting with drugs? You know what I mean? Like with booze, with pot, whatever, you know what I mean? Like that's something that not every kid does, but a lot do. You know what I mean? And it's not the worst thing in the world. It's not going to ruin your life, but there are issues attached to it and dangers attached to it if you have underlying mental health issues. And you know, someone who's suffering from this, especially someone who's young as well, who's dabbling with it, they don't know. Even adults who suffer from schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, psychosis, they don't know that they're suffering from that. Like Nick right now, sitting in Twin Towers, doesn't know what happened to his mum and dad, doesn't remember doing what he did, and feels like he is the victim of the worst possible conspiracy you could imagine. In his head, he's been accused of something so unthinkable, and being treated so unfairly, and he doesn't know why. He doesn't know why. He just knows that he's the victim of a conspiracy. And I really, that's the type of mindset we're dealing with here. So if he doesn't know he's done that, someone with these diseases, these disorders, doesn't know that they're suffering from it. They don't understand it. And I think with more awareness of what the symptoms are and how to spot them at an early age, like I said earlier, we're not going to prevent every tragedy, but hopefully we can prevent some. Hopefully we can prevent some suffering in the world, because there is already so much, and I think that, like, if Rob and Michelle's legacy, if it isn't just that for their amazing work, Michelle as a photographer and Rob as an amazing actor and director and writer, I think that their legacy is that it shows that it raises awareness of issues that they were passionate about, that affected them directly and that affects a lot of people. And you might not ever know it. You know what I mean? A lot of people in life carry or are suffering in silence and don't tell anyone about it for fear of shame and ridicule, or that they feel like they're attention seeking or whatever, or that their trauma isn't as bad as someone else's trauma or something like that, or that, but there are plenty of people who are suffering. And like my advice, like I said in the last live, don't suffer in silence. If you don't want to tell your friends and family about it, there are lines and phone lines you can call totally anonymously, someone you'll never have to see in person, that has heard it all and possibly been through it themselves on these lines. And they'll talk to you and they'll let you, talk it out with them. And, it might seem unlikely when you're in the midst of an episode or going through trauma or the symptoms, but talking about things, rationalizing it, can help. You don't know until you try. And that isn't, I'm not someone who's just talking from afar. I've been through some difficult times. Like my dad suffers with epilepsy, and like my earliest memory of him as being taken is of him being taken away by the EMTs, the paramedics, because his heart stopped whilst he was having a seizure. So like that's trauma, you know what I mean? Like, and lots of people have trauma, but childhood trauma, and you have moments, and you might notice it in my life. I'm going to get quite vulnerable here. You might notice it in my life. Sometimes I pause mid-sentence, and I'll let you in on a little secret. That's because I'm getting these kind of almost like OCD, like intrusive thoughts, where I'm remembering traumatic stuff that's happened, like stuff to do with my dad having seizures. And it's like it comes in at moments like when I'm on a live, when I'm trying to keep focused, or when I'm recording in the studio making music, or when I'm performing live, or when I'm playing rugby. It comes in those moments. And for many years I just take drugs to try and shut it out. And I still take marijuana, and that's medicinal for that purpose. But it still comes in, and it makes it easier, I suppose, the pot for me to manage it and deal with it. But like, on my last live, it happened. It just came in, and I'm a lot better with therapy and with various techniques that I've learned in therapy at grounding myself, at reminding myself that that's the past, that isn't now. But, that's how the mind works. That's how a traumatized mind works. And mental health is in the same kind of category as trauma, you know what I mean? It's your brain working in a way that you don't want it to work. So anyone who's suffering out there, I've been vulnerable and I've been real with you, you know what I mean? And I'm not bullshitting you, you know what I mean? I'm not just some guy watching from a distance, or some student of psychiatry, pontificating about what you might be going through. I have my own understanding of what trauma's like and what a troubled mind can be like. So you're not alone, and you can get through this, you know what I mean? I'm not a slave or constantly bombarded by the trauma of things I've experienced, you know what I mean? And I know a lot of people in my audience have their own trauma too, you know what I mean? And my message to all of you is that you're stronger than it. It doesn't define you. You're still here. It's past. It's gone. You know what I mean? It might be easy to just say that, and it is easy to say that because it can keep crawling back in at the worst of times. But like I say, grounding techniques is a great way to do it. But I'm glad I shared that with you all, because like I said, getting things off your chest helps. You know what I mean? So you have more understanding of me, of like why sometimes if I pause mid sentence, and that's why, I'm grounding myself. But yeah, a lot of people don't know that, and because I guess I feel embarrassed to share it. But I guess that's what I'm saying. The stigma attached to trauma and mental illness. I'm sure Nick was probably like, he never mentioned on the Dopey podcast that I don't think he was diagnosed at that point. He was diagnosed in 2020, but he didn't mention. I'm sure he would have already have gone through the symptoms of schizoaffective disorder by that point. So he never mentioned that on the podcast. He never mentioned the thoughts, the paranoia, the crippling depression. He never mentioned those things, because I think it is easier to talk about substance abuse than it is mental illness or trauma and things like that, because I think people are more willing to hear about it, for some reason. I don't know. But I think the two are linked. I think, like I keep saying, I think substance use disorder is a mental illness in of itself. And I think, like I keep saying, rarely does someone, just dabble in it and do it for fun and then get cripplingly addicted. Addiction is usually typically rooted in some kind of trauma that you're trying to cover, you know what I mean, and to break free from or to suppress in your own mind. It's rarely to do with you just have poor impulse control, you know what I mean, and it isn't anything like that. It's chemicals in your brain, but with strong will and with faith in yourself, you can overcome anything. But that's I'm bit of a sidetrack, but it is linked to what I'm talking about. It is an important conversation that I think we should normalize more of. I think in light of the whole horrible situation that's happened with the Reiners, that I might do more lives talking about mental health awareness and substance abuse awareness and things like that. Because I think that it's important. I don't just brush over this. I don't just, this is another true crime case. What's next? You know what I mean? And I think a lot of creators do see these cases like that, but I'm not looking at it like that. I'm looking at it like, this is real. This is a tragedy. This is affecting Romy and Jake and a lot of other people in Hollywood, and just fans of Rob and Michelle like me. You know what I mean? It's just hard for me to even fully accept that this has even happened and then he's not with us anymore. Stage of grief, you know what I mean? And I never met the guy. I didn't know him. I knew his films, and I think in that sense that as a musician, I know that I put aspects of myself, what I want, what I hope in life, the way I see the world, into my music. I know, like, all of it that I've posted on here are instrumentals, but if you understand the tone of it and the titles and the imagery that I'm using, you'll understand that there are messages behind it and that I'm trying to convey a certain kind of like point, you know what I mean, or perspective, and that's symptomatic or typical of my personality, who I am as a person, what's in my soul. That's creativity. That's what you do in art. You put things out, you say things that, generally speaking, you don't want to say or can't say. And with Rob Reiner's films, especially Stand By Me, I felt that he was doing that. He spoke and he revealed parts of himself, and that in which he revealed of himself, I related to. I was like, I can relate to that. He felt like he was in the shadow of his dad. I felt like I was in the shadow of my dad. He felt he was always going to be bound and tied to what his dad did, and he could never create, his own way in life, his own, image, his own style. You know what I mean? And I used to think that. but I don't anymore. You know what I mean? Of course I don't anymore. But that's a theme that spoke to me in a deep way when I was very young. So that's how I feel. You know, people talk about parasocial, whatever, but that's true. In art, you reveal parts of yourself. And if someone can understand that aspect of you and identify with it in themselves, they do in a way know you. They know your parts of your soul almost. You know, they don't know what you're doing day to day. They don't know what's in your head, but they know a part of you. And I think that that's an important thing. And obviously, I'm not, you know, that can lead to some crazy people, you know, stalking and obsessing and all that. And I'm not condoning or saying that in any way, because that's disrespect. That's crossing a line. But what I'm saying is understanding and sharing, you know, something that you can identify in someone else through their art, I think is a brilliant thing, is a great thing. That's what art is. That's what art's there for. And I think other than just his art, and I do the OCD thing where I go right back off point, but then it's kind of related to the point, but kind of not. But then I come right back round. In the past, I used to forget where I started. Now I'm able to come right back round. I'm getting better, folks. I'm getting there. But yeah, I think other than their art, Michelle's brilliant photography, Rob's brilliant filmography. I think that their legacy should be that they love their kid, they love their son, and they try to do the utmost for him, sending him to 18 rehabs, you know, letting him stay in the guest house, bringing him to Conan's party so that he can socialize with people, giving him a large allowance, making it so that he doesn't have to go out on the streets on his own. Every time he went homeless, it's because he chose to, because he didn't want to try and be sober. You know what I mean? It wasn't because they booted him out. They wanted him to be there, but they wanted him to try and get better. They didn't want to watch him destroy himself. You know what I mean? And make his mental illness worse, you know, and I think that their legacy is that they loved their son and that they wanted to understand their son, and that to remember them, we should try and understand people a little better. And if someone is, you know, exhibiting traits from an early age, or someone that you love is exhibiting traits of mental illness, don't just shut them out. Don't just bin them off. You know what I mean? Like I say, help them, but you know, within reason. Don't allow, obviously, protect yourself if there's a dangerous situation, and that's without that goes without saying. If you think someone's a threat to you, don't keep them close, you know. But if someone's exhibiting other kinds of, you know, symptoms of mental illness, like paranoia, crippling depression, delusions, you know, don't push them away, and or substance abuse issues, don't push them away. Keep them close, try and get them some help, but also obviously lay boundaries, set boundaries. You've got to set boundaries for yourself, I think. And this isn't just me pontificating here. You know, I've seen all this. I've seen this type of thing in life. You know, I'm just going through what I've, you know, observed. You know, and but yeah, I think that their legacy should be, you know, care about those that you love and never give up on them. And I think they never did. They never gave up on Nick, and they paid, sadly, the ultimate sacrifice for it. Like I was talking with Laura from Perplexed True Crime on my live about this, where she says, and I completely agree with her, that I think that they would both be happy that at least he's not going to be able to hurt himself or anybody else ever, and that he can get help that he cripplingly needs. And that's what brings me back to an earlier point of it shouldn't take a tragedy like this, and it shouldn't take someone threatening to end their own life in another scenario for people to actually get good mental health help. It should be there always if someone feels they need it, without having to go through all these chutes and ladders. Because if you're suffering, you're going to be immediately put off by that, and you're already hesitant, I think, to share in these things because of the shame that society attaches to substance abuse issues and mental health issues. Even if you're talking to a professional, I think that most people are paranoid and worried. And if someone's already paranoid, why wouldn't they be paranoid about that? The system needs to make it so that accessing this kind of help isn't so difficult, so that you can get people early on, and then when they are in the system, make sure that their medications are monitored properly and that they're not changed flippantly for just simply a weight gain or some other trivial reason like that. Like I said earlier, what would you rather have? Someone gain some weight or someone commit a murder and not remember it, kill their own parents and not remember it? There needs to be serious reform in the mental health industries. And I think Rob and Michelle would be happy for their legacy to have inspired that a change in the mental health system, making it easier for people to access mental health help before it gets to this level, and for there to be more scrutiny of these doctors and rehab facilities, and for medications to be watched over and monitored a lot more strictly, and for there to be a board of other doctors that it has to go through. I already thought this was the case. Apparently it isn't. Apparently medications can be changed just on the will of one doctor. I think that if medication for a disease as serious as schizoaffective disorder, if someone suffering with that's going to have their medication changed ever, it needs to be from a panel of doctors that approve it. I think that should go without saying, and that has to be something that is brought in. And I will lobby for that, and I will stand on my soapbox for that. I think that it really needs to happen. This case has brought out, and it's sad that only because they're famous are we really talking about this. Is everybody talking about this? Sadly, if it was just a guy who lived in Brentwood and the family, yeah, we'd probably be talking about it. It would probably be mentioned by Court TV. But if they weren't rich, if they weren't famous, if they were in Compton, if they were in East LA, would we be talking about it? Would Court TV be talking? I don't think so. How many cases are there of people with schizoaffective, schizophrenia, psychosis who kill people they love? You know what I mean? And kill people close to them in a brutal way. It happens a lot, a worryingly large amount of instances this happens, but we don't hear about them. Why is that? This is big news. This is a serious issue that doesn't just affect the rich. That isn't something as evident with all the rehab trips, getting him supposedly the best therapists, the best medical care, with all the money in the world that they threw at it, millions of dollars, I'm sure, and it didn't change the problem. It shows you that money on its own doesn't change this, doesn't help this. What it takes is understanding. That's what it takes. Understanding and people having ethics in these sectors of mental illness and addiction recovery. And once large amounts of money are exchanged, ethics, sadly, can oftentimes go out the window. And that's a grim reality that I've found researching this case and researching rehabs, the various rehabs that Nick went, and hearing other stories from other people who were of a similar background to Nick, the son or the daughter of rich people in Hollywood, whether they're in the entertainment industry or not, developing substance abuse issues from a young age, developing mental health issues, and then once they get into these rehabs, basically being able to set their own parameters and never getting better, because in these corrupt rehabs, I'm not saying all of them are like this, but a lot of them, it seems, they don't want these kids to get better. They don't want these people to get better, because if they get better, their parents, their rich parents, are not going to keep forking out 30 grand a week for them to have their stay in there. And that's a real issue. And it's corruption. And like I say, and with the doctor changing his meds just because of weight, that's severe negligence. And corruption and negligence have resulted in 2 people losing their lives in a horrific way. And obviously, Nick's mental illness is a major part in this. But if it had have been managed by the people who were paid lots of money to manage it, this would never have happened. What I'm hearing is he didn't have a history of violence a month prior to all this, that he wasn't. Have they released a PCA? I'm not sure. I don't think so, because I'm pretty sure I would have seen it going through everything that I've gone through, Googling like everything like Reiner case related. I'm pretty sure I would have seen it, but I could be wrong. You know what I mean? I'll double check after I've finished with you on your live after this. And yeah, anyone who is just joining or who didn't hear me earlier announce, I will be on Amber's live in about 9 minutes now, 10 minutes after I finish. And I'll be putting my acting skills to the test. I will be playing the part of the FBI agent who was quote unquote questioning Nicole Kessinger. And so after I'm done here, you're more than welcome, everyone who's watching, to join us over there if you want some more of me. But if you're fed up with me and you need a break from me, I completely understand. I am a bit much. I understand. But I think, like I was saying, back to serious points, we do pivot. We do pivot a lot. But I think it's important. But back to serious points, I think after competency hearings, and I think after a judge or a jury finds Nick, not guilty by reason, because the process is a judge has to find that Nick is competent to stand trial. And just because Nick is found competent to stand trial doesn't mean that he was competent when he committed the murders. That doesn't mean that at all. It only means that he can be either found not guilty by reasons of insanity. That can only happen. He can only be found not guilty if he's found competent to stand trial. If he's never found competent to stand trial, he never will stand trial. And that's a really, that's a situation or a chain of events that not a lot of people are familiar with. I wasn't familiar with it. I thought even if you were insane, that they would put you on trial and then it's up for the jury to determine if you are or not. No, a judge has to determine that you're competent. And that is based off advice from external people like court-appointed psychiatrists and people whose job it is to know this stuff, who will know if someone's pulling their leg or putting it on. And obviously it isn't, because he has this diagnosis and we have precedent with the change of medication. So there's a good chance Nick might never be stable enough to go into court. But maybe they get his meds right. He comes out of this delusion that it's a conspiracy and that it never happened. And then he can be put on trial. And then 99% chance that he will be found not guilty by reasons of insanity because of the precedent of the medication change and how he was acting. And there will be testimony of party guests, of other people in his life, and to show that he was not competent. So if that ever happens, we'll obviously be covering it and everything like that. But I won't keep doing lives, like clickbait lives, just trying to, tragedy pimp off this, because I really have been affected by this. Not as near as much as their family, like Romy and Jake and Tracy and all their friends, Billy Crystal, and Larry David, and everyone who was close to Rob and the family. You know, nowhere near that level, but I was just a fan of his. You know, but yeah, I'm never gonna keep milking or try and milk this in any way. This isn't for views. This is for awareness, and I think that this case, like I keep saying, the one good thing out of all this is that it will raise awareness of these issues that are sadly so neglected, and hopefully it can create an energy in people to start lobbying governments, to start lobbying officials, to start lobbying doctors and other and the medical field to have more transparency and more care in these matters, and for there to be more funding and easier access and less hoops to jump through for people who need mental health or addiction help. Yeah, I think that truly should be the legacy of this case and what this case is. I don't agree with the clickbait titles of oh, you'll never believe what's happening to Nick in Twin Towers. Nick's getting tortured inside. He's not. Like I said in my other live, Nick is not having any interaction with any inmates. And even if he did, like, anything that they said would mean absolutely nothing to him because he isn't in his right mind. So, and a lot of the other people are not in their right mind. So I hate when people just spread false stories, false headlines, just for a click, just for a view. You know, like I'm talking about, sadly, in true crime, there are people who are so detached from it all that they forget that this is real. This happened and this is affecting people in the worst way possible. And this isn't something to be, you know, exploited in any way. If you know, gonna do a live about it, do it to raise awareness about something, do it to try and, you know, raise awareness and help, you know what I mean, not try and exploit. And I'm glad, you know, we have a community of ATS, Alex Erickson, Amy Boston, Melly, who was in here earlier, who's I think going to be doing a live soon as well. She's always live, Melly. Yeah, I don't know where she gets the energy from, but she's always live. So if you're ever in the middle of the day, you don't have anything to do, Melly's always live. So check out her channel. Yeah, but yeah, you've got all these people like Laura Perplexed, True Crime, and Cher as well, who you know, who cover these cases with care and cover cases that affect that register with us for whatever reason, that make an impact on us. We don't see dollar signs like other creators, like Hidden True Crime, like Lauren Matthias does. You know, like we don't run down to the scenes of these instances and start trying to make it all about ourselves. You know what I mean? None of this is about me. This is about the Reiners. You know what I mean? All I'm doing is sharing things about my substance abuse history, my trauma, is to make it so that if anyone out there is listening who is suffering, has, you know, knows that there's someone out there who's been through it too, that it isn't some abstract figure on the TV screen, that it's someone that they're listening to, that it isn't a celebrity. I'm not famous. I'm nobody special. I'm nobody. You know what I mean? I'm nobody. You know what I mean? And I've suffered from stuff, and I've been through stuff. So if you're suffering, you know what I mean, you're not alone. You know what I mean? I'm not some celebrity. You know what I mean? I'm just talking to you as an ordinary guy, as a normal person. You know what I mean? There's no and with me. You know, I'm just saying it as I sees it. And if you like it, great. If you don't, that's also great. But yeah, I'm just glad of all the support that I've had on this. And yeah, going forward, obviously we're starting to wrap it up now, but I'm really grateful for all the support that I've had in the comments and in the chat tonight, and from everybody. And because it's not an easy case to cover, and it's not an easy case to listen to, but I really appreciate it, and I have done a lot of lives on it, and I know that there are other cases going, but this is an important case to me. You know what I mean? So I'm going to keep an eye on it for new developments, and I'll keep everybody posted. But going forward, I would like to do lives, like I said, about substance abuse, mental health, trauma, recovery, things like that, like important issues as well as true crime. You know what I mean? Because I think it's all linked. You know what I mean? And my music, I'll be putting more music out soon as well. So keep an eye out for that. I've been working on some new songs. Like I've nearly got an album's worth of material that's unreleased where I do sing on it as well. So you'll get to hear me sing for the first time, some of you. So yeah, that'll be a treat. But yeah, going forward, I've got those lives planned, and true crime related lives. I want to do some ones about some cases from the UK and Europe, ones that you guys, you North Americans and maybe even Europeans might not have heard of. And as well, I'd love to look at some older cases as well from the US that don't get a lot of attention. So yeah, just cases that don't get a lot of attention, I think will be my new focus moving forward. And if there is a big case that, you know, resonates with me in any way, of course I'll cover it. You know, of course I will. But generally speaking, I'm going to go for the underdog because that's how I feel I am. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for being here. And you can see me over right now at ATS Live, ATS News Live. I'll be right over there in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. So yeah, in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Thank you. Oh, glad you could make it, Val. And I got your message that you were watching. But yeah, thanks for being in chat. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and hopefully see you over at ATS or you can watch in chat. But yeah, thanks everyone. Peace and love. Bye.